It's Brian and Trisha. We are Quicksie 98.3. In the studio with us this morning, Jenny Oldham, Hardin County Attorney. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
We've got election coming up in just under 2 weeks. And along with that, sometimes there are special things on the ballot that have nothing to do with political races, either party. These things can be called constitutional amendments, right?
Right.
So we've got a couple of those things on there, and because it can be difficult to understand them, and not knocking you or anybody else in your profession, but these are written by attorneys, and I'm a college dropout. I can't read these and understand what it is. So can you break it down for us non-attorney folks? What are these constitutional amendments, and what are they about? What's the nuts and bolts of what it is or what it isn't?
Yes, good question. And I'm going to try to do this without giving any personal opinion, because obviously I'm also a voter, and I've obviously have probably a position on both of these. So if I do this well, you will not know what that is. You're right. It is confusing. There are two amendments. Amendment 1, the purpose is to make it clear in our Constitution that no person who is not a citizen of the United States would be allowed to vote in the state of Kentucky. So that's actually Section 145 of our Constitution, our state Constitution. So the whole state of Kentucky will be voting on Amendment 1. Now, I will tell you that Section 145 says already every citizen of the United States, the age of 18, who meets residency requirements. So it kind of already says that.
Okay, so this would be just spelling it out a little more clearly.
Clarification, I think. It does add that sentence. So the sentence it's asking to add is no person who is not a citizen of the United States shall be allowed to vote in the state.
Now, this doesn't, if it does or does not pass, does not, in literal terms, change the way we would vote in Kentucky or who would be allowed to vote. It's just a clarification.
It's a clarification.
Okay.
Yes, clarification. Okay. It also adds the word she to he. So instead of having the general he in our Constitution, because, it was written back in 1891, I believe, when there were only he's voting.
Yeah, I was going to say at that time, only he's were voting.
Only he's were voting. Okay. So we're going to make sure we clarify that the she's can vote.
And there's a second constitutional amendment, and this is the one that you possibly have been hearing more about because it involves education, and obviously education is very important to our families here in the state.
Right. So public education is funded by public dollars. Constitutional Amendment number 2 is asking to create a new section of our Constitution. So it's not changing an existing section, but it says notwithstanding 7 sections that already exist, we're going to do this. So there are 7 sections currently in the Kentucky Constitution that speak in some respect toward the fact that that public money can only be used for public schools.
Okay.
If you're into this and you want to go read the Kentucky Constitution, you'll see the word common schools. So common schools means public schools. So specifically, there are already 7 sections of the Constitution that say no, public money is for public schools. And actually, Section 189 says no part of any fund or tax dollars for education shall be used specifically for any church, sectarian, or denominational school. And
which goes back to, on a national level even, separation of church and state.
Perhaps, yes. I do think that some of that is grounded there. And so this new amendment, Amendment 2, says notwithstanding these 7 sections, the General Assembly may provide financial support for the education of students outside the system of common schools.
Okay.
And so you're asked yes or no. There is an additional paragraph above that. So when you go into the polls in 2 weeks, and I would definitely encourage you to go to the polls, you will see this. To give parents choices and educational opportunities for their children, are you in favor of enabling the General Assembly to provide financial support for the education costs of students in kindergarten through 12th grade who are outside the system of the common (public) schools by amending the Constitution of Kentucky as stated below? And then it says that they may provide.
So make sure I'm clear on this, because again, I'm not an attorney and I want to make sure I understand. So number 2 on the amendment, if you put in the affirmation or a yes, this would mean that you would be for changing the Constitution to allow for the public funds to be used for what we would call non-common schools.
Correct.
That aren't just public schools that everyone can go to.
Correct.
Now, if it's put in the no, does that actually change the Constitution, or does it leave it as it is?
Very good. It would leave it as is.
Okay.
So then we have those 7 prohibitions that say you can't do that.
So there wouldn't actually be any amendment made to the Constitution at all because there wouldn't be anything changing.
Correct. It stays as is.
Okay. Well, again, number 1 wouldn't actually change the Constitution. It would just make it more clear who is allowed to vote and not. And number 2, if it's negative, then it would not change the Constitution. If it's in the affirmation, then there could be a change as to how public funds are spent towards education. Are we missing anything? Is there anything else that might be puzzling to people?
You're not. The only thing that can be puzzling, I think, we all get well, maybe not everyone. You go in to vote, you're prepared to vote, and you get nervous for some reason. And so you may get nervous because it's a lot of words. It's a couple paragraphs on Amendment 2. So don't get nervous. I will tell you, and Brian Smith, our county clerk, will certainly tell you, take your time. You have time to read these. So don't get intimidated by the fact that there is a couple paragraphs on Amendment 2. Read it, reread it. But a yes would mean that this public money can be used for private, non-public schools. A no would mean no change to our Constitution. Do remember that most of your ballots are going to be two-sided this year because of this question and the number of candidates on the ballot, so make sure you flip that ballot over.
And, of course, everyone's ballot is not the same. I live outside of a city limits. I'm only in the county, so I can't vote for city councils.
Correct.
And one other thing I guess people need to remember, this is a general election, and Kentucky, in general elections, you may vote for whomever you would like. It doesn't have to be the same party under which you're registered.
Correct. So if you're a Democrat, you can vote for Republican candidates. If you're a Republican, you can vote for Democratic candidates. And certainly on constitutional amendments, you're free to vote however you like.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jenny Oldham, Hardin County Attorney, and just giving us a good overview of these constitutional amendments that'll be on the ballot coming up for you on Election Day. Thanks for coming in.
Okay. I appreciate you having me. Thanks, Brian.
And we are Quicksie 98.3.